back to another episode of Voices of PropTech. Today we have Kairee joining us, SVP at the SWIG Co. And Kairee, I have heard your name more and more and more these days. So clearly, whatever you're doing is working, and it's working well. And so instead of me butchering your introduction, would love to hear from you who you are, the role that you hold, and what your mission is. And let's take it from there.
Well, thanks, Emil. Thanks for having me. So I'm Kairee Tann. I'm the Director of Innovation and Community Impact at the SWIG Company. And so we are a vertically integrated owner-operator of office buildings, mostly on the West Coast and also the East Coast. And my role, I wear many, many hats, and I'm sure we'll get into all the different things that we do around here. But the innovation department is solely responsible for establishing our sustainability policies. We publish our company's ESG report. We also vet most of the PropTech solutions that come to our company, especially related to our buildings and our tenants. And then we wear another hat, which is community impact. And so it's an opportunity for us to really marry real estate with what we do in the communities in and around our buildings.
Interesting. And I always am very eager to understand how people landed up where they are, what path has led them to where they are today and the person that they've become. So would love to unpack that more. And oftentimes, yes, there's a very compelling professional component to all of that, but there's also the personal motivators that have led to the decisions you've made and ultimately where you are today. So would love to understand your journey, both professionally and personally, that has brought you and I to, to this interview today.
Yeah, what has brought us together anyway? I know it's been a long journey.
Yes.
I have to say my journey is probably longer than your journey to getting us here today because I've had a long career, but I really began my career journey in the construction space. So I started my career with Turner Construction. I actually started with them right out of high school. I was a summer intern with Turner while I was going to college for my civil engineering degree. And so I spent 5 summers working on job sites, being that sort of like boots on the ground field engineer, learning the ropes. And I spent 5 summers with Turner while I was going to school. And then after I graduated, I interviewed with other companies just to kind of see how things, compared. But ultimately, Turner was really the right place for me. And I stayed with Turner for 10 years before joining a different general contractor. This time it was a local contractor, Webcore Builders, local to California at the time. And they offered me a wonderful opportunity to build a cathedral. So it's kind of hard to turn down that kind of an opportunity.
Yeah.
And I promise this will kind of lead to where I am today because there is a relationship. But I spent 10 years with Webcore Builders as a project manager. And right around, so now we're at the 20-year mark here. And as my kids were going into high school, I wanted to spend more time engaging in, the things that they're doing, sports, all the things, getting them ready to apply for colleges. But at the same time, I didn't want to set aside my background in construction management and engineering for a completely different career. And a friend of mine who was a colleague way back in the day when I started my career, we happened to bump into each other. We had stayed in contact for many, many years. And it turned out that she worked here at the SWIG Company. And although at the time I wasn't, looking for work per se, she did reach out to me and presented an opportunity to join the SWIG Company. And this was a position that was created specifically for me as an in-house construction manager to help the company on a very large repositioning project. Now, the connection there from way back when is that this was a building that the SWIG Company had purchased about 10 years prior to my joining. And she was the general manager of that building at the start of my career when I was working with Turner. And I actually worked with her for about 3 years doing all of the renovations in that building. So fast forward 10 years, and then we're back at Webcore. Well, the cathedral project that I was working on was next door to the building that ultimately ended up getting purchased by SWIG. And so, long story short, I kind of knew where all the bones were buried because I had worked on that project so many years ago. And so it was a really good fit to join and really bring my career full circle because I literally was tearing out finishes and the lobbies and certain floors that I actually had built out 20 years prior. In fact,
Yeah.
I saw my name on some of the as-built drawings. My maiden name were back in
Yeah.
the day. We used to sort of like update all the changes to the drawings, and then you'd sign your name off as an as-built drawing. So it was definitely a full circle moment for me of like tearing out and rebuilding what I had built years ago. And that does go to the sustainability piece too, is that I have a hand in building buildings that we are now working to make more energy efficient and to
Yeah.
decarbonize them. So I told you it's going to be a long story, but but this is what brought you and I together today.
That is, I didn't expect that. That's really interesting. Um, Loyalty. I find it very uncommon to come across somebody that has spent 10 years at one company, let alone three. Because if I'm not mistaken, it was 10 years at Turner total, right?
Mhm.
I don't know where those fireworks came from, but clearly
Awesome.
you're
Well, we're
celebrating.
celebrating. We are
10 years, let's go.
we're celebrating my.
Since,
It's a what do you call it? It's a hat trick. I've had
yeah,
10 years at Turner,
at
10 years
each,
at
yeah.
Webcor, and going on 10 years at SWIG.
So that is something that I think is interesting and unique because you really don't see that often at all these days. Why do you think that's so uncommon? Why do you think so many people are moving around at the pace they are? And why is it that you have remained loyal and committed to the companies that you partner with for a decade?
Yeah, well, I think that I mean, part of it is just like a sign of the times. And, I was born during a time where I think, it was very common to stay with your company for life. That was definitely something I saw in my family, and it really inspired me to think of joining the job market in the same way. A
Yeah,
lot of my family members worked for Boeing. I'm originally from Wichita, Kansas, and so most of my family members worked at the Boeing hub there, and these were lifelong careers. I still have a cousin who's maybe in his 60s at this point who
hmm,
still works for Boeing, and so I already had that stage sort of set for me that you work at a company for your entire life, and it definitely was. I mean, you say loyalty, but it really was a hard decision for me to jump from Turner to Webcor because I still to this day consider Turner as my family. In fact, I've continue to correspond with their CEO, their director of engineering, their director of innovation, because now we can have these conversations about how can a contractor help us decarbonize our buildings. And
yeah,
so I still keep those relationships intact. So I still feel very loyal, even though I don't work there anymore. I'm more of an alum, and I still have a lot of friends from there that are going on their 30 and 40-year anniversary that still work there. So I think it is certainly a sign of just the generation that I come from, if you will. I think I'm a Gen X. Yeah, I think I'm a Gen X, and so I think that's part of it. Today, that's a great question. I think that there are just so many opportunities that younger people were looking for, and they're looking to maybe accelerate um, their careers. And so I think that's a factor in terms of how long people stay, or I guess how short people stay.
hmm.
Um, yeah, so I mean that's my take on it.
Do you think that they are actually accelerating their careers, or do you think that in other words, do you think it's short sighted? Do you think that if they were to stay committed, stay loyal to the company they've chosen, whatever that might be, for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, again, which like the average is now 3 or 4 years, right? If they were to extend that, double that, triple that, do you think that they'd actually be better off in growing their careers? I'm trying to understand the incentive, and I think it is quite short sighted. And I think it also not only may it be short-sighted for the individual, the employee, but I also think that it's comes at a detriment to the business, the employer. I mean, you spending 10 years at Turner must have been such an asset. You said it yourself. You know where the bones are buried, right? Whether
Mhm.
it's Turner or Webcore, whatever that might be. Like you possess knowledge and information that takes years to gather, and so it does come at a cost to the business, no doubt.
True.
Do you think that people would actually be better off had if they extend their tenure with companies that they work with for the most part?
Well, I think it's definitely a personal decision. I think it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, when I speak for myself and think about the reasons that I did switch to two different companies and really had to kind of deliberate on that. As I mentioned, part of it was lifestyle, part of it was for family, but
Yeah.
also it was to to have better opportunities, if you will. So I wanted my career to move along a bit faster, if you can believe that or not. And I think that for me, it was working in a larger company. It was a bit challenging to kind of get to those next levels because the company was just so large.
Yeah.
And again, and the opportunities, at that time, um, you know, the economy was going through whatever it was going through at that time. And so, if you find an opportunity that will kind of set you apart from, I guess, the competition, if you will,
Mm.
that's how I've always looked at the assignments that I've chosen. The projects that I've done, tended to lean towards projects that were very challenging or very unique. Um, and so I think it's a personal decision. Now, for I guess if I'm thinking about like my kids as they're entering the workforce, I probably would encourage them to, to at least hang in there, 5 years, not be jumping around every couple of years. But I think that 5 years is enough time for you to know whether it's going to be a good fit and or to know whether there's a future for you there. I mean, I have to say, I'm not going to throw shade on any of the companies that I've worked for, but um, I definitely have the thought that maybe I had stayed too long in certain ways,
Mm.
that I waited too long to get to those next levels or was waiting for that promotion and in certain ways I thought, well, maybe I should have,
Left sooner.
left sooner, so
Interesting.
but I also look back on it. I mean, it's, hindsight is 2020 and the
Yeah.
grass is always greener. So, but where I am today, I'm certainly happy that I made those choices. And I think that I tended to be just my own personality type is I tend to be, pretty loyal and I tend to stick things out, even if it's challenging and even if it's maybe not the best idea. I tend to finish everything that I start. So it's a little bit of hard headedness in there too, I think.
You can call it what you will, but that topic is interesting to me because listen, if I'm not working on vendor PM, I'm studying psychology or philosophy. Those are my personal
Okay.
um, deep interests, right? And so to me, I look at more the psychology and the behavior of let's say my generation, and it's one that is extremely lacks the ability to delay gratification, um, lacks focus, lacks the ability to endure challenges. And as a result of that, you see whether it's at work, I'm not happy with my boss, so I'm going to quit and leave my job. Or you see it in their personal lives, they take up a new hobby and it doesn't go well. And so they quit, or they start dating somebody and they're not happy because the honeymoon phase wore off and they leave. And it's just, you see this behavior more and more and more. And so I find it interesting that like you can copy and paste the behavior and the patterns you see in my generation's personal life to their professional life, and you're seeing the same thing unfold. And you're never going to accomplish anything great if you decide to pack things in the second that you hit a roadblock or a challenge. And
Yeah.
again, that's when I see somebody that has a remarkable tenure, both in their personal life and a
Yeah.
relationship or with a company. And I'm okay. You are somebody who is willing to endure difficult things because it's not going to be
Yeah.
sunshine and rainbows 24/7. And so it's unfortunately unique these days. But when you come
Yeah.
across it, I'd love to, understand it more.
Yeah, so the timing that you mentioned that is great because I was just picking up my phone so I could pull this quote up. So this is something that I printed out and actually put on the fridge at home. And it was for me, to be honest, but it was also for my son. He's 20 years
Okay.
old. He's an aspiring pro golfer, and he had a rough 54-hole tournament over the weekend, and he was just really beside himself. He was so beside himself that he walked home from the tournament. He would not like he wanted to sort his thoughts out because he
Yeah.
really expected to do so much better in that tournament. So like what you were saying about instant gratification, like he came there expecting to win, and when he didn't, he was thinking, I think I'm gonna quit golf. So this is the quote. Maturity is achieved when a person postpones immediate pleasures for long-term values. So that's kind of like what you
On the
what you were
money.
saying. So that was on the fridge, and then I let him walk home, and because I drove up beside him, I had him on Life 360, so I knew exactly where he was.
Yeah.
And so, so I pulled up alongside, and he's like, "I'm walking home. I'm walking home." And
Yeah.
so I'm thinking, okay, So when I got home, or when he finally got home, or actually, I take that back. I came home later than he did. I went ahead and ran some errands, gave him some
Mm,
space so he can cool off. By the time I got home, he had registered for another tournament.
there you
So,
go.
but it's a lesson that
It's
I
what it
think,
takes.
yeah, it's what it takes. It's a lesson that I think, no matter what age you are, you have to remind yourself that you have to stick in there for the long haul. And that's tough, especially, for the younger folks today that, they're flooded with everything in their social media feeds that are telling them that, that person's already arrived, but what's not being told to them is the journey it took for them to get there.
Yes. Yes. A similar quote that I live by is you cannot beat somebody who never gives up. It is physically impossible because eventually that person will outwork you and outlast you and they will win. If you apply that to the prop tech world, let's bring that back to
Mhm.
obviously the core of why we're here. If you look at the players that are dominant and have one market share, i.e., Yardi, for example, um, the common trait is that all of them have simply survived the longest, right? Procore, great example. Procore
Mhm.
has such an incredible journey. I remember talking with Tui and the founding team there, and they explained to me how, I think at the point when I met him, the company was about 22 years old, if I'm not mistaken,
And
and
did they spin off of CMIC or
that I don't know. What
okay,
I
okay.
do know is that, and again, I don't want to. I'm not putting words in his mouth, so don't quote me on this. But I believe that I think it was like the first 15 years that they were just puttering around and like couldn't really get traction, couldn't really get adoption in the market. But they survived for 15 years, which is extremely difficult to do. And then
Mhm.
the following seven, when I met him, I think they were at like an $11 billion market cap public company. And there is something to be said about who can you can't beat somebody who never gives up. And so there's something to be said
Mhm.
about outworking and outlasting everybody. I remember even in my personal, this is going back now. Before starting Vendor PM, I was a competitive swimmer, and I remember kind of similar to the story, but your son triggered this thought. I had this race that I was like so locked in for. It was a national level race. I was like so just dialed in to get it, and I didn't. I didn't get the outcome I wanted. And there's the facility that we competed in, there was like the pool where all the races were taking place, and then there was like a separate pool where people were just warming up, warming down, and whatever. I was so beside myself after that race. I got in that training pool, and for 3 hours straight, I just back and forth nonstop. I don't know what it was. I either needed to just cool off to your, kind of your son's comment. I just needed to like get out of my system. I either needed to like prove to myself that I could do it, and I just kept going. I don't know what it was, but it's like I didn't pack it up after that. Like I just got right back in the pool. I'm like, all right, you messed up. We're gonna get after it now.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of my experiences growing up, swimming being a major part of it, you're training twice a day, before school, after school, every
Oh
single
yeah.
day nearly. I think that was foundational in building a mindset and the discipline of somebody who embodies that. You can't beat somebody that never gives up, and that's what I've brought into Vendor PM. And it's crazy the amount of market share we gain every subsequent year, not as a result of our technology necessarily getting better or our team getting bigger, any of those things, just as a function of you've been around longer, people hear about you more and more, you get more customers, and then they build credibility with other customers, and all those things is just like the natural function of time and not giving up necessarily. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting the rabbit hole we went down there, but I think it's unique, and I think it's one that I I wish our generation possessed, because it's clear that they're losing it. And I commend your son for being an outlier in all of that.
For walking 5 miles home.
Yeah. For better or worse, he's still
Yeah.
registered for another tournament.
Right, right. I was, I thought, well, maybe this is it. Maybe we're done with golf. But yeah, by the time I was like, yeah, I didn't say anything to him, but in my mind, I was like, yes, that's the spirit. Like, it's like I knew he would come through. Like, but I think he has some, I can't take credit obviously for, the achievements of our children,
Mhm.
but I think that them seeing their parents being the type of people who kind of started from nothing essentially and continued to just persevere and didn't give up. And I think we do set that example for them. And so, perhaps that's part of it too, is just, maybe there aren't enough examples for people to see. And I think that when we do our community impact work here at the SWIG Company, it's an opportunity for us to engage with students who may not have those examples at home.
Mm.
So most recently, we worked with College Track, which is it's a college program for students that are first generation in their families to go to college. And so one of the things that we do with them is each year we bring them into our headquarters building here where I'm sitting in San Francisco, and we bring about 20, 25 students. They get to see a tour of the entire building, but they also get to meet some of our tenants, and they visit our central plant. They work with or they get to visit with our chief building engineer and understand, how buildings operate. And for some of them, this is the first time that they've been in an office building.
Yeah.
And our employees volunteer their time as well to talk about how they came to real estate. And many of us have come here in different, circuitous ways. And it's an opportunity for students to see that, see themselves in that person, whether it's me as a woman or as a Black woman in real estate, engineering, construction management, all of that. Just showing up and sharing my story, you never know who that will influence to keep going to that next level and to not give up. I mean, it certainly was that way for me, being exposed to, certain people in the industry as a young person that gave me the idea or the hope that, yes, I can do that too.
Speaking of which, actually, that's a good segue to a question I had. High school, you had more options than Boeing and Turner. So why pick construction when the world was your oyster, and literally it could be anything at that stage of life?
Ooh, yeah, that's an interesting. Like, why did I choose construction? Well, the question is, why did I choose engineering as well? And it really started back
Yes.
there in high school. So I was fortunate to really have a lot of support in the way of people looking out for me. I think that there were, teachers and counselors who they saw that, I was someone who was had the aptitude, I had the grades. I didn't necessarily have the attitude because of what was going on at home in my personal life. And I think they saw that. They saw
Mm.
that I needed, more role models. I needed, help, if you will. And so in high school, there was a pre-engineering program at my school that's still running to this day. I've actually met some founders of prop tech companies that went to my high school, had the same teachers. It's crazy.
That's incredible.
And so I had a teacher though who she tried to enroll me in the pre-engineering program, and this was a program that the class was a period, so it's before 8 o'clock. It's like from 7 to 8. No one wants to get up at that time, and so yeah, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll sign up. But of course, I was not going to that class. I was cutting it. And she found out that I was cutting that class, and she found me on campus and walked me over there to my analytic geometry class. And then, 3 years later, I was taking like the physics AP exam.
Yeah.
By the way, she and I are still friends to this day as
Oh, I
well, and
love that.
I really credit her for the start in my career, because if I hadn't been in that program, I wouldn't have been introduced to the internship program that ultimately connected me with the construction management internship. So, I mean, I certainly did think about, becoming a professional engineer and, staying in school. But the opportunity to really hit the ground running, working in such a great company, I haven't looked back.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, to your point, everything's obvious in hindsight, and grass is always greener. But this, like, there's no point in looking at the other grass when you're watering the one you're on. So,
Mhm.
that's interesting. And a lot of the listeners that we have fit into two categories. The first be those on the real estate side, where their role is indexed more to tech and innovation, or on the founder side, we have a lot of prop tech companies and executives and founders that are listening to the podcast as well. What I think is interesting, especially to the prop tech side, is founders are always asking me, like, how did you get a deal with this company? How did you partner with that company?
Mhm.
How did you, who was the right contact? Like, it's clear that getting into companies like the SWIG Company or any large real estate organization is quite a challenge. And oftentimes, these larger organizations have a innovation department or a head of innovation, SVP of innovation, like yourself, for example. So, I have a few questions around this, but the first is, how does technology find its way into the hands of SWIG Company? Is it typically, the operating team coming to you and saying, I have this solution I want to launch? Or is it more you sourcing and filtering and then bringing forward to them what you think is most cutting edge and most valuable?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a nuanced answer. So I'll answer it two ways. So I would say when it comes to certain types of technologies, we were talking about Yardi earlier.
Mm,
Um, if it's a move to migrating to the cloud, which is two things that we did last year, was we migrated to the cloud, and we also migrated to Yardi. And this was, a decision that was really made out of necessity for both decisions.
yeah.
And but I will say that it's not that. I get the sense that it's not that common for commercial real estate companies to really adopt new technologies. Like we're historically slow to adopt new technology, as you probably hear a lot. So in terms of like how prop tech solutions come to the company, for the most part, they come, in different ways. A lot of folks reach out to me, and in fact, I spend a fair amount of my time vetting prop tech solutions and fielding demos and phone calls and introductions. And wherever I can see a potential use case, or even if it's not something that we are looking to adopt, I'll still do my best to give my time. Or I will, be very clear about when I can focus on it. If it can't be, a call this week or next week because we're in the middle of budget season, then I will defer the conversation to 6 weeks or 8 weeks. I'm very transparent. As I want to be able to pay attention to what you're saying, but I can't do that right now. But please check back with me. So I try to have as many conversations as I can. So
Okay.
I think that's where it's about sourcing. So, to answer your question, sourcing it in a way of just interviewing and learning as much as I can about as many companies as I can out there. And a lot of those companies I'm introduced to through conferences for the most part, and occasionally by peers within our company that hear about other companies and say, hey, this is an AI company that may be able to look at decarb for us. Maybe we can check them out. But we don't have like an official department beyond, my own that's technology solutions. So they kind of come to us pretty organically.
Yes, and it sounds like you or your department is the mechanism to which they come into the business. It sounds like that's for the most part how. Okay, so
For the most part, anything that's related to prop tech as opposed to
yeah,
like the accounting side.
yeah,
On the property on the ops side, like on the property management side, those solutions have come to me as well. But the way that we are structured, we typically aren't looking for like a project management solution, but we are starting to explore that a bit as I think as the industry is moving more in those directions. So I do see in the next couple of years potentially the asset management team, adopting more technology on the property management side. But for now, we really are self-managed. We don't need a lot of tools. Most of our technology is really about making our buildings attractive, for new tenants as well as tenant retention, which is where the H3 Experiences program comes in.
there's no possible way that you can answer every phone call and email from every company that wants to talk to you. So if remove the fact that I'm the CEO of Vendor PM, remove Vendor PM from the conversation altogether. For advice to the everyday founder, the everyday head of sales or revenue with a prop tech company, what is the right way to get your attention and get a meeting with you or any other innovation leader in our industry? Like, how do they get your attention?
Okay. I don't know if there's one formula that would fit. And I do answer all the phone calls though, Emil.
Then you are
I
you
mean,
are one of a
I mean,
kind.
certainly there are definitely inbounds that have nothing to do with what we do. So I'll start there. I'll say that, it's really important for founders or companies to really do their homework about the SWIG company before they just kind of haul off and say, I can do this and that for you. So you're right. I don't return those calls or inbounds when it's clear that they don't know what we do, and they purchase my name from a conference list or something like that. So those, it's pretty obvious. You can see it's kind of spammy. You can see that
Mm-hmm.
those are not the ones where they need to be. Um, but I also think, it's important for founders to show up if they can in person and be in places where owners are going to be, whether it's a BizNow conference or whether it's CreTech or Realcomm, and make that kind of personal introduction if they can. And I know that's daunting, to walk up to someone and be like, "Hey, I'm Emil from Vendor PM," but I mean, I think that's the best way to do it. It's a human way, that's for sure. And then last, I would say like the email inbounds are probably not as effective. I feel like I've made the most connections by meeting people in person.
Yeah.
Occasionally, I'll get a message on LinkedIn, which does help me at least do some research on their company and see, whether it's a solution that even applies to us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
On the conference note, so I didn't mention this, but I before getting into our industry, I had a window cleaning business that me and my co-founder today we co-founded and started back when we were in high school, like literally first year of high school, grade 9. And we had gone door to door every single day for 7 years in a row. And you're speaking
Wow.
to 100, 200 people, strangers, every single day. My ability to go up to any stranger and say the things that need to be said and not fear rejection has certainly been whipped into me, without a doubt. So I actually quite enjoy going up to strangers at a con. When I know I'm like, that's the person I want to meet with, I have absolutely no problem going up. And yes, I get it can be quite daunting, but when you do it politely, respectfully, and with the kind of confidence and I really do think that they appreciate and respect it when it's done the right way. And it's something that I've learned to do, throughout my entire life. So yeah, I do think it's incredibly valuable. And you're right, in person, that has been, again, founders always ask me, how are you growing, at the rate you are and all things. And one of the things that really clicked for me this year is how valuable in person is. So, I really wasn't on the road all that much, but as of, early 2025, I've been on a plane almost every single week, and it has changed the trajectory of our growth. It is remarkable. People build trust and relationships so different in person, and the
Yeah.
results speak for themselves. So, I, these things might sound simple, but hearing it from me is one thing. Hearing it from the buyer, being yourself, to those listening, is incredibly helpful. Now, one more question, but I want to look at it from the other side of the coin. What advice do you have? Because what we kind of just talked about now is somewhat advice framed for the founders, the prop tech companies. What about for the buyers and the real estate companies? What advice do you have for them? What do you wish they would do differently when it comes to purchasing, evaluating, buying, using, adopting prop tech, that whole category?
Oh, okay. So the buyers. Okay, so you're talking about people like me. Okay. Well, I
Whether it's
can.
whether it's you, or it's the
Yeah.
maybe it's the VP of property management buying it, but the real estate side, the buyers at the end of the
Mhm.
day of the technology.
Well, there are two things. One would be to have an open mind, and I know that that's kind of like woo woo woo, but I think that there is a tendency to think that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We've always been doing things this way. Why should we change? Or, this is already going to cost us too much money. I don't think it hurts to look at something. It doesn't mean that you have to say yes. But I think keeping open mind is, I think that's really important, just to, to see what's out there. I think it goes back to what you're saying about, not you can't beat the person who never quits kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, so as that relates to us, as that relates to the buyers, it's about adapting and realizing that you have to adapt. If you don't adapt, you will perish. So I don't think we can continue to do things the way they've always been done, and I don't think that we can always say that we're not going to fix it if it ain't broke. Otherwise, I think you'll get left behind. So that's one bit of advice. Um, from my own lessons learned and how I would like to do things better in terms of adopting new prop tech is to really take a more methodical approach to doing the proof of value or doing the pilot project. I've done a number of pilot projects, and I've done one proof of value where we did end up working or hiring that company and continuing to grow with them. It's a startup, um, but I think it can be. I just want to be more, I guess, strategic in terms
Mm-hmm.
of how we do pilot programs. First, identifying what problem we're trying to solve, and that way we're not wasting our time and that company's time and resources and money. I would also like to consider doing more paid pilots, because I think that you get more out of a paid pilot than you do from a low cost or no cost or free pilot. And I'm
Agreed.
probably going to get in trouble for saying that. Like, you want to what? You want to pay for this stuff? But I'd like to, I'd say that that's something I'd like to do more of, and do a better job of having pilots that are very very strategic and more planned out, as opposed to just trying every new thing.
Yeah, we learned the same lesson. Again, on the other side of the coin, where at early days we would do free pilots, and eventually we said no more. Like, we're charging a decent amount for pilots, because it's too easy to just say yes to a pilot, let alone a free pilot, and this isn't going to
Yeah.
get the attention it requires for this to be successful on either side. And so, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. Um, and just building on this kind of notion of advice to both founders and buyers, I think it's okay for founders to say no to prospects sometime. It might be a bit controversial, but like, because what early stage company wants to say no to the opportunity to work with company X or company Y?
Yeah.
But
No, I
but
have an
you
example. I have an example of that, as a matter
please.
of fact. So there's a company that's local to the Bay Area. It's a startup that they do modular kitchens for
Mm,
multifamily in a very sustainable way. And I met the founders of this company at a conference a few years ago, and went to tour their showroom and saw the wonderful work that they're doing. And I'm very much in support of them. In fact, I just did a LinkedIn post on them specifically. And I remember asking them, like, can we, do a project with you? And they had, not that they said like no, but I mean, they really were, they know their business, they know their sweet spot, and they know that they need to be in residential at this point in time. And that to tackle, these modular kitchens in a commercial endeavor would be not something that they could take on. Maybe someday, and I'll be there supporting and, waiting for when they get there. But I think that that's another part of the response to your question, is that in terms of how to do pilots better, is to be strategic and what's best for them as well as for
yeah,
for your company. So yeah,
yeah.
I've had one pilot turn down, but but I'm still very much in support of what they do, and I think eventually there'll be a way we can make it work.
Well, hats off to them, because the I've seen the cost of saying yes to a customer that will drag your business down the path it shouldn't go down, and resources are finite, extremely finite at the stage of these early stage prop tech companies. Um, the it kind of comes back to the short term gratification again, but like the
Mhm.
short term gratification of that deal, that signature, cannot outweigh the long term costs and distraction that that customer, that pilot, may eventually have on your business. And it's so
Yeah.
hard to see. It's so hard to see, especially when you've got employees and investors and all these people that are relying on you to come through and deliver, and you want every
Mhm.
win, because that's the momentum that fuels you to the
Yeah.
next one. It truly is a challenge.
Yeah.
Kyrie, is
I've
there
got
any? Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. I was going to say, I've got a question for you on that note. Actually, I
Sure.
was thinking of a pilot that we did a pilot a number of years ago, and I won't be specific because I don't want to call anyone out, but
Mm,
um, it, we weren't able to scale beyond like the first building, and I went in, to the pilot saying that, I believe, making that clear, is that, every building that we own is basically a unicorn. They're all very different. And, one of our challenges is that it's difficult to scale some of these prop tech solutions for buildings that have different BMS systems, what have you. And it was just sort of like, oh, well, then we kind of got dropped pretty much at that point because I was transparent and letting them know that we wouldn't
mm.
be able to scale. And so I don't know, what's your advice for buyers and or to founders to understand that, especially for existing buildings, or an existing portfolio, I should say, that it's not going to be easy to just rip and replace and standardize everything across a portfolio.
Yeah, it's there's two things that come to mind. The first is that it certainly depends on what kind of solution we're talking about. If we're talking about a solution that is deeply embedded into a building's DNA, and each DNA of each building is so unique, every building is a unicorn, um, then that has to truly be taken into account. And to the company that you're referring to here, if the math just truly didn't make sense for them for whatever reason, then okay, same idea as the kitchen,
Yeah.
the modularized kitchen, right? That's the exact same logic. But when I interview technology leaders and real estate executives, they all say something similar, which is, if they're giving advice to founders and prop tech companies, it's that these companies need, and you said this almost identical when we talk about the outreach. You need to understand your customer, and you're not going to find everything you need online, but you need to take the time to like really understand their process, really understand their culture, really understand their people, really understand what makes building A different from building B and building C. Because I see it all the time, like founders just it's like in one ear, out the other, just sign here as quick as you can. And it's like, that's not actually going to be a successful partnership. So again, I think that's the core of it, is like really do what it takes to understand your customer intimately so that you can deliver the unique solution that is required for their unique company and their unique buildings. Where it depends is on the technology, because I'll use vendor PM as the example. While you may have built one BMS system versus the second BMS system, vendor PM, the way that you onboard vendors, the way that you tender at work, the way you manage contracts, that's actually going to be standardized across the portfolio. Now, there'll be custom nuances, and that's all built into the way that the software works. But like, if you're using technology to displace process or improve process, then that typically should be standardized across the portfolio. Yeah. But if we're talking about the way a very specific thing is done in a very specific property,
hardware, it's hardware related.
Yeah, hardware versus software is really what we're talking about. Then, then either they're in the wrong business, because they need to understand that no two buildings are alike, right? Are identical, and so they need to intimately understand that. And then, listen, at the end of the day, there's a number. There are some unit economics where all of that does make sense, and so they need to understand that and build a business model that sustains that and supports that. Otherwise, that's going to happen with every company they talk to, and there's not going to be a sustainable business there.
Yeah, agreed. Well, thank you for that insight.
Of course. Is there anything important that we should have talked about that we didn't get to?
Oh, let's see. Gosh, I feel like we covered a lot. Any questions for me? Any last questions for me?
Where can people follow along? Like I said, I meant it. I've been hearing your name in the industry more and more and more. At every conference, your name comes up. People speak incredibly highly of you.
Scary. I did not know
for all the right reasons. Listen, it's a great sign. Whatever you are doing, it is having an impact and it is working. And I think more and more people are going to continue taking note. And so, where can our listeners follow along, follow your journey, and get in touch if they'd like to?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I would start by learning more about us through our ESG report, which is online at our website, which is swigco.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and as well as the SWIG Company. So those are the best places to reach me. And then, yeah, definitely check out our website, because that's where you really learn a lot about who we are as a company, who our people are. My department was responsible for updating the website, so I feel like there's a lot of my personal touches. I have my hands on everything in there, and I'm constantly like tweaking it and trying to make it better and resonate with people who come to visit. So yeah, and then I'm at every conference, so just about.
Which shows are you going to be at in the next? I guess between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, between now and the end of the year, I will be at PropTech in New York during Real Estate Week, which is always really a lot of fun, and it's a great opportunity to meet companies that oftentimes, believe it or not, I've ended up working with. I'll also be at NexusCon, which this is the first time that I'll be attending that, and that's going to be in Denver. Both of those are happening in October, and I believe I'm done for the rest of the year. I think I've been at 6 or 7 conferences this year. And yeah, actually there is one more. So the ULI fall meeting is taking place in San Francisco. That happens to coincide with Greenbuild in Los Angeles, but I will be there not so much as an attendee, but as a guest and potentially a panel speaker. And that's in September.
No Blueprint this year?
I have not gone to Blueprint before, but everyone recommends it. Yeah, if you can get me on the list, I want to be there.
We'll talk after.
I do have a conference budget, and I have to be mindful of that.
Well, let's see what we can help with. I believe I'm speaking at both Blueprint and PropTech. I'll double check with the team.
Nice.
But yeah, we'll definitely get together at the conferences, and let me see if I can help out there. But Kairee, it has been a pleasure. I look forward to spending time in person, and just immensely grateful that you took the time. I know our audience will really appreciate it as well, so thank you.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to be asked to contribute.
Awesome.